She was worth nearly $500 million. He thought she was worth nothing. And on the day she was supposed to marry the man she loved, Victoria Sterling stood inside a magnificent New York wedding hall wearing the one outfit her fiancé had never seen her wear before, a simple black assistant's uniform. She stood quietly near the altar, watching Ethan Carter smile at another woman. He looked happier than Victoria had seen him in months. The woman beside him was dressed beautifully, surrounded by flowers and expensive decorations, and Ethan looked at her with a tenderness that should have belonged to Victoria. But there was something Ethan didn't know. The woman he had spent the previous 30 days talking to, trusting, defending, and eventually falling for wasn't a stranger at all. She was Victoria Sterling, the billionaire's daughter he was already engaged to marry. 30 days earlier, Victoria had made a decision that seemed almost impossible to justify. She wanted to know whether Ethan loved her for herself or for the fortune attached to her name. So she disappeared from her own life and entered it again under another identity. But Victoria didn't expect the experiment to uncover something that would change the wedding forever. Because Ethan didn't fall for Nora Bennett in a single afternoon. He fell for her one conversation, one secret, one act of kindness, and one difficult day at a time. And when Victoria finally removed her glasses and revealed the truth, Ethan didn't immediately beg her to stay. He looked at her with tears in his eyes and asked one question that she had never prepared herself to answer. Why didn't you tell me? Before Nora Bennett existed, Victoria Sterling had spent most of her life surrounded by people who wanted something from her. When they met at a charity event in Manhattan, Ethan didn't spend the evening asking about her father or discussing business. He asked Victoria what she wanted her life to look like when nobody else was making the decisions for her. She remembered that question because nobody had asked it before. Their relationship grew quickly, but not carelessly. Ethan made her laugh. He remembered small details. He called when he said he would. When he proposed, Victoria believed she had finally found someone who saw the woman behind the Sterling name. But as their wedding approached, something changed. Ethan became busier. Conversations became shorter. There were nights when Victoria would ask how his day had gone and receive only a tired smile and a vague answer. None of it was enough to prove anything, but enough to make an old fear return. Was Ethan falling in love with Victoria, or with the future that came with Victoria Sterling? She tried to dismiss the thought. Then one evening, while looking through a set of wedding documents, she noticed Ethan had been discussing a financial arrangement connected to the Sterling family business. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even necessarily wrong. But Victoria couldn't stop thinking about it. She wanted certainty before she walked down the aisle. So she called Maya Brooks, her trusted assistant, into her bedroom and made a proposal that sounded ridiculous even as she said it. For 30 days, Victoria would disappear. Maya would help manage the public version of her life, while Victoria would enter the company as an ordinary assistant under a different name. She wouldn't use her credit cards. She wouldn't wear her jewelry. She wouldn't tell Ethan who she was. She would simply become Nora Bennett. On the first morning, Victoria stood in front of her mirror and barely recognized herself. Her designer clothes were gone. The diamond engagement ring was locked away. Her long black hair was pulled into a simple ponytail, and thin glasses rested on her face. There was nothing dramatic about the transformation. That was precisely the point. She wasn't trying to become another beautiful woman. She was trying to become invisible. At the Sterling Company offices, she introduced herself as Nora Bennett, a temporary personal assistant. Ethan walked past her that morning without stopping. He didn't recognize her. Victoria had expected that moment to hurt, but she wasn't prepared for how deeply it would. The man she was planning to marry looked directly at her and saw a stranger. For the first several days, Ethan barely noticed Nora. He was busy, distracted and focused on an important business negotiation. Victoria watched him carefully. She noticed how he treated senior executives, how he spoke to receptionists, and whether he thanked people who couldn't do anything for him. Those small observations became the real experiment. She wasn't watching to see whether Ethan would be attracted to another woman. She was watching to see what kind of man he was when he believed nobody important was watching. And on the fourth day, she saw something she didn't expect. A junior employee accidentally sent the wrong figures to Ethan before an important meeting. The employee was terrified and expected to be humiliated. Instead, Ethan calmly told him that everyone made mistakes and helped him correct the numbers before the meeting. Victoria noticed. It didn't prove he loved her. It didn't even prove he was the right man for her. But it reminded her why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. The first real conversation between Ethan and Nora happened on the seventh day. It began with something completely ordinary. Ethan couldn't find an important document before a meeting, and Nora happened to know where it had been filed. She handed it to him without making a big deal about it. Ethan thanked her and then noticed the book sitting beside her computer. It was a novel Victoria had once recommended to him. He asked Nora whether she liked it. Victoria almost laughed. Instead, she told him why the story mattered to her. For the first time, Ethan stopped rushing. They talked for nearly 20 minutes. Not about money. Not about the company. Not about weddings. They talked about family, fear, ambition, and the strange pressure of becoming the person everyone expects you to be. Ethan told Nora that he sometimes felt people admired the version of him they had invented rather than the person he really was. Victoria listened silently because the words struck too close to home. He was describing exactly what she had been afraid of. The conversation ended when Ethan's phone rang. But something had changed. Ethan began greeting Nora every morning. Not romantically. Not yet. He simply seemed to enjoy talking to her. That distinction mattered. Victoria had entered the experiment expecting Ethan to prove himself immediately. Instead, she discovered something more complicated. He wasn't attracted to Nora because she was glamorous. He didn't even know she was beautiful beneath the glasses and plain clothing. He was becoming comfortable around her because he felt heard. And for Victoria, that was both comforting and terrifying. By the 12th day, Ethan had begun seeking Nora out without realizing he was doing it. He would ask her opinion about small decisions. He would stop by her desk after meetings. Sometimes he would tell her something funny that had happened simply because he wanted to see her reaction. Victoria noticed another change too. Ethan had started talking about his childhood. One evening, after most employees had left, he admitted that his father had once told him that marrying into wealth would solve every problem he had. Ethan hated the idea because he wanted to build something of his own. He said that was one reason he had fallen in love with Victoria. He believed she understood ambition without confusing it with money. Victoria almost told him the truth. She wanted to say, "It's me. I'm right here." But she stopped. Instead, she asked him a question. If Victoria lost everything tomorrow, would you still want her? Ethan answered without hesitation. Yes. The answer should have ended the experiment. Instead, it made Victoria more confused. Because now she had a man who was telling an ordinary woman that he would stay with his wealthy fiancée even if she became poor. But words were not enough anymore. Victoria wanted to know whether Ethan's actions matched them. So she kept going. By the 17th day, something had changed between Ethan and Nora. They had developed a friendship that no longer felt professional. Ethan trusted her. Victoria could feel it. One evening, after a difficult business meeting, Ethan found Nora sitting alone in an empty conference room. He asked whether she was okay. Victoria said she was tired. Ethan sat down beside her and told her about the pressure he had been carrying. His business was struggling with a major contract, and he was afraid of disappointing everyone who believed in him. Victoria gave him advice based on what she knew about the company, but she carefully avoided revealing information only Victoria would know. Ethan looked at her and smiled. He told her that she had a way of making difficult things sound simple. Then he said something that frightened her. "I wish I had met you years ago." Victoria felt her heart sink. She knew what he meant. He didn't know Nora was Victoria. To him, these were two different women. That night, Victoria went home and stared at the engagement ring locked inside her drawer. The experiment was supposed to answer one question: did Ethan love her for herself? But now the experiment had created another woman in his mind, and that woman was becoming important to him. Victoria realized she had built a test that could destroy the relationship it was designed to protect. On the 21st day, Ethan almost discovered everything. He walked into Victoria's private office unexpectedly while she was looking through documents. She quickly closed the drawer. Ethan recognized the room but didn't understand why Nora was there. Victoria explained that she had been asked to organize old files. Ethan accepted the explanation, but his expression changed. For the first time, he looked at her differently. Later that evening, he asked Daniel whether Nora had always worked for the company. Daniel said he didn't know much about her. Ethan didn't explain why he was asking. He simply said there was something familiar about her. Meanwhile, Maya warned Victoria that the experiment had gone too far. Victoria finally admitted what she had been refusing to say. She was falling in love with Ethan again, but this time as Nora. The confession terrified her. Maya asked her the question Victoria had been avoiding. What happens if he chooses Nora? Victoria had no answer. Then Ethan called Nora that night. He wasn't calling about work. He simply wanted to talk. Victoria answered, and for almost an hour they spoke about the future. Ethan admitted that he was confused about his feelings. He said he cared deeply about Victoria, but he also felt something he couldn't explain whenever he was with Nora. Victoria listened while the man she loved unknowingly confessed that he was falling for her. And for the first time, the experiment stopped feeling like a test. 3 days later, Ethan asked Nora to meet him outside the office. They sat at a quiet restaurant far from Manhattan's busiest streets. Ethan looked nervous. He told Nora that he was getting married soon. Victoria already knew. Then he admitted that he had started questioning his feelings because he couldn't stop thinking about her. Victoria felt her entire plan collapsing. She could have ended everything right there. She could have told him the truth. Instead, she asked what he intended to do. Ethan said he didn't know. He told her that he didn't want to betray Victoria, but he also didn't want to pretend his feelings for Nora didn't exist. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She finally understood the cruelty of what she had done. Ethan wasn't simply failing a test anymore. He was trapped inside a situation created by the woman he was supposed to trust most. Before they left, Ethan told Nora something that would haunt Victoria for years. He said, "I don't know who I'm supposed to choose anymore." Victoria returned home that night and removed the glasses from her face. She stared at herself in the mirror and realized the truth. Ethan had not fallen for money. He had not fallen for a surname. He had fallen for the woman he believed Nora was. And that woman was still Victoria. By the 27th day, Ethan was visibly torn. He became quieter around Victoria and more emotionally open with Nora. Maya begged Victoria to end the experiment. Victoria finally agreed. But before she could reveal everything, Ethan received information that made him suspicious. A financial document connected Nora to the Sterling family. He confronted her about it. Victoria denied knowing anything. Ethan didn't believe her. He told her that there was something about her that felt familiar. He remembered conversations they had shared and began connecting details. The way she held her coffee. The way she tilted her head when she was thinking. A phrase she had used during their first meeting months earlier. Suddenly, Ethan wasn't looking at Nora as a stranger anymore. He was looking for Victoria inside her. Then Maya made a mistake. She accidentally referred to Victoria by her real name while speaking to Ethan. Ethan froze. He asked Maya what she had just said. Maya tried to correct herself, but it was too late. Ethan left without another word. Victoria knew the moment she had feared had finally arrived. On the 30th day, Victoria asked Ethan to meet her in a private room at the wedding venue. She arrived wearing the same black assistant uniform she had worn on her first day. Ethan entered and looked at her silently. Victoria's hands were shaking. She told him that everything he had experienced with Nora had been real, but the identity had been false. Ethan asked who she was. Victoria slowly removed her glasses. Then she released her hair from the simple ponytail. Her face was no longer hidden behind the disguise. Ethan stared at her. "Victoria," he whispered. She nodded. He stepped backward as though the room had suddenly changed. Victoria explained everything. The experiment. The 30 days. Her fear that he loved her because of her wealth. Her desire to know whether he would choose her without knowing who she was. Ethan listened until she finished. Then he asked the question Victoria had feared more than anything. "Why didn't you tell me?" She tried to explain that she needed certainty. Ethan told her that he understood her fear, but he didn't understand why she had been willing to destroy his trust to prove it. Victoria began crying. She admitted that she had been so afraid of being loved for her money that she had tested the one person she wanted to trust. Ethan didn't shout. That somehow made it worse. He simply told her that he had loved Victoria before he ever met Nora. But he had also fallen for Nora because Nora had given him something he desperately needed, someone who listened without expecting anything from him. Ethan didn't forgive Victoria immediately. That was important. He needed time to separate the woman he loved from the deception she had created. Victoria offered to cancel the wedding. She told him he deserved someone who trusted him. Ethan walked away without answering. For the next several days, they didn't speak. Victoria returned to her normal life, but the luxury felt empty. Her mansion felt colder. Her jewelry felt heavier. The engagement ring stayed inside its box. Then Ethan returned. He told Victoria that he had spent days asking himself what he had actually fallen in love with. His answer wasn't money. It wasn't the sterling name. It wasn't even Nora. It was the person he had met beneath all the labels. But he also told her that love without trust could not survive. If they were going to continue, there could never be another test like this. Victoria agreed. She told Ethan that she had learned something too. She had spent her entire life afraid that people wanted her wealth, but that fear had caused her to judge someone before giving him the chance to prove himself. Ethan took her hand. They didn't pretend the experiment hadn't happened. They decided to face what it had exposed. Weeks later, the same wedding venue was filled with the same flowers and the same crystal chandeliers. But this time Victoria wasn't hiding behind glasses or a false name. She walked down the aisle as herself. Ethan waited at the altar. There was no Nora Bennett. There was no experiment. There was only Victoria Sterling and the man who had learned that loving someone meant seeing beyond the identity everyone else saw. When Ethan took her hand, Victoria looked into his eyes and understood why the 30 days had changed them. The experiment had begun because she wanted to know whether Ethan could love a woman without her fortune. Instead, it forced both of them to confront something much harder, whether love could survive when trust was broken. Ethan didn't choose Victoria because she was a billionaire. He chose her after seeing the frightened woman behind the wealth, the woman behind the glasses, and finally the woman who had been afraid of losing him from the beginning. And Victoria learned that sometimes the person we are most afraid of losing is not the person we should test. Sometimes they are the person we should simply trust enough to tell the truth. Victoria Sterling had wanted 30 days to discover whether Ethan Carter loved her for who she was or for what she owned. Instead, those 30 days showed her something she hadn't expected. Ethan could fall for Nora because Nora was simply Victoria without the wealth, the name, the expectations, and the fear. But love wasn't the only thing that mattered. Trust mattered too. And that was the price Victoria almost paid for her experiment. In the end, Ethan didn't choose the billionaire's daughter over the assistant. He realized they had always been the same woman. The real question was whether they could build a marriage after discovering just how fragile trust could be. So let me ask you something. If you were Victoria, would you have tested Ethan the way she did, or would you have trusted him enough to ask the question directly? And if you were Ethan, could you forgive the woman you loved after discovering she had secretly tested your feelings for 30 days? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.